Hey everyone, it's Shotzi for the Rough Cuts. It is not Sunday. Sunday was a few days ago. I suck, I'm sorry. But I'm fully awake, as you know, because I mentioned last week. This weekend was Butt-Numb-A-Thon number 14, which I was lucky enough to be able to attend. So I'm going to talk about the movies that I saw there. But, did you miss me? Did you miss me? You did, didn't you? Hope you did. Anyway, so I'm going to read off the list of movies because thinking of them off the top of my head after that weekend, which lasted, well, not really like the full weekend. Well, the weekend was really long, but the event itself lasted about 26 hours. So it's difficult for me to think of every single movie that I saw off the top of my head. And the clips, the trailers, all of that. So I'm going to talk about the list as well as what I think of the films, or at least the new films, because there were a lot of vintage this time around, and you know how much I love vintage movies, because I talk about them all the time on here. So I'm going to go into those individually in the weeks to come, because many of them I've seen multiple times. But the new ones I'm going to talk about a little bit, because in a few days and upcoming weeks, everyone and their Aunt Minnie is going to be talking about these movies, especially the second movie on the list. Movie number 1, Teen Wolf. We got to see this movie finally, not in its entirety, however, because unfortunately the film, it was like the actual 35mm, it melted twice at the very end. So we did not get to see the full film, unfortunately. Or fortunately, because Teen Wolf isn't one of my favorite movies. But it did fulfill the dream of one of the BNAT goers. It was still entertaining. It's an entertaining movie. Not my favorite, but it's entertaining. Okay, we then got to see the preview for Star Trek Into Darkness. It looks amazing. It looks absolutely phenomenal. Really excited to see that coming up. Okay, the second movie that we saw was The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. This was in the 48 frames per second format in 3D. You know, some people were projecting how much it was going to suck. It was going to look like some sort of like 70s drama. I have to say, it was amazing. It was absolutely gorgeous. I loved it. I loved it. Some of the scenes looked a little too real, but like some of like the slower scenes, it was too clear. Like it looked almost cartoonish because of how incredibly clear it was. But the rest of it, I've never seen 3D that gorgeous and vibrant before. Even though it was a little, like, actually dark. Peter Jackson was there to introduce the film and also do a Q&A afterwards. He said at the premiere in New Zealand, they would simultaneously run 2 projectors so that it would be brighter when being shown on the screen. However, you know, most theaters just have 1 projector, such as the one where I was. And so he said it looked a little bit darker, but it still looked good. And this is a kid's story. It might be scary for some of the kids nowadays, since you don't really have that many movies designed to scare the crap out of kids like you did when I was little. But I think they'll really, really enjoy it. It's a gorgeous movie. It's a little slow in the beginning, but just like the book, you know, it starts off a little slow, and then the pacing is just really, really good. Acting great, cinematography phenomenal, and just the 3D was just beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, and it didn't just have depth. It's like you felt like you could feel it, like you could move your head and see around objects. That's how it felt, and it was amazing. Afterwards, we saw some action sequences, like with the G.I. Joe trailer that was shot in 24 frames per second, and it wasn't as smooth. Already there was a difference. We're already spoiled by the 48s. The 24, it just wasn't as smooth. It's like the whole saying, you know, if like once you've seen the view from the mountaintop roof of the house just isn't the same. It's kind of how this was, unfortunately. But the story was great. It looked great. Acting was great. The singing, I like this. It's not a musical by any means, but the singing that was actually done in the film Those were all of the voices of the actors. So they're multi-talented men. Great. It's awesome. It's awesome. Definitely go check out The Hobbit. I know all of you are. And if you can, go watch it in the 48 frames per second. See what you like. Maybe you prefer the 24, but I really like the 48 frames. In the slower sequences, it wasn't necessary, but from my understanding, how the cameras were set up, it was set to just go at 48 and not below that. So that's why they didn't do variable speed with the film. Okay, afterwards we saw like video clips and then Broadway Melody of 1940, Eleanor Powell and Fred Astaire. I adore this movie. I adore Eleanor Powell. She's just one of the brightest, sweetest faces that you could ever see in movies, and her dancing's amazing, of course, as well as Fred Astaire. Goes without saying. I loved that movie. Gorgeous print. Unfortunately, that one melted too at one point in time, but they were able to fix it, so loved it. Gang's All Here, one of my favorite musicals of all time. When I was younger, I would watch this movie no fewer than twice a week. So I was really excited to see it in 35mm in the theater. And print was gorgeous. Oh my gosh. This was the only full Technicolor film that Busby Berkeley, I can't talk, directed, and gorgeous, phenomenal. Okay, then we saw like various other trailers that were out there. Okay, then we watched Mama. This was produced by Guillermo del Toro, who also did, not an introduction, but he did the Q&A afterwards for this film. Horror film, PG-13, and this is another one of those movies that, you know, kids could watch, and it would probably scare the crap out of kids, which they should be. You know, kids should be scared every now and then because life isn't all, you know, sunshine and roses. But it wouldn't scare them to the point to where they'd never want to, like, go to bed or be in the dark or anything.